Hello, this is Crane, and this is an introductory video to the Robo expand Protoss versus Protoss build in Starcraft Brood War. Robo in PvP is really it's the gold standard. It's the go-to build, and that's because it's very safe. It's safe against DT, against 3-gate, against various other builds, and it's also quite versatile. If you learn one variation of 2-gate Robo, you can easily learn a bunch more. This specific iteration that I'm going to show you is the 6 Goon, 1 Observer, 1 Reaver expansion version. But if you learn this build, you can also learn versions that go for a strong 2 Reaver shuttle timing. You can learn a version that does a very, very fast drop with speed. You can do a version that does a shuttle and then a Reaver and does a strong timing push very early, or a bunch of other versions. This build is just very robust and versatile, so I highly recommend it. So we're going to do what's pretty much standard for every PvP and PvT. We're going to do a 8 pylon, 10 gateway, and then we're going to send our probe to scout in PvP. Seeing our opponents build relatively early is important in PvP, mostly because of 2-gate Zealot. We need to be able to see that and react to it relatively early. On 12, we're going to add our gas, which you can do a gas on 11 or on 12. Both are valid. I personally prefer to do it on 12 since we don't need as much gas. On 13, we're going to add our cybernetics core and then send 3 probes to our gas to start mining. On 14, we're going to start a zealot. This zealot is important mostly to defend against a potential 2-gate, but also because if our opponent does a manor pylon, we want to have that zealot ready to kill it as soon as possible. On 16, we add a pylon. We want this pylon to be relatively close to our ramp so that later in the game we can add our robotics facility close to the ramp, and we could walk an observer or a reaver quickly to our natural to defend. When our core finishes, we're slightly supply locked until this pylon finishes, and then we can immediately start our Dragoon. And then we're going to start our range. There's going to be a small probe cut in order to afford this range, but Dragoon range is extremely important in PvP, so it's okay to do this small probe cut. With this probe here, we want to scout their range timing. We want to see if their range starts at the same time or after our range. If their range starts late, then that usually means that they're going to go for a DT or a fast robotics before range. So that's an important thing to know. On 24, we add our next pylon, and we're going to make constant Dragoons and constant probes until 28 supply, and that's when we're going to add our robotics facility near our natural. Some players do a robotics on 25 or on 26, cutting a Goon or a Goon and a probe. I prefer to do mine on 28 just because it allows us to do constant Dragoons, and I think it just flows a little bit better with the build. But you do it on 25, 26, or 28, they're all valid. It's all okay. On 29, we're going to add a pylon. In this rep, I accidentally do it a little bit late, but that's okay. So 29, we're going to add a pylon, and then on 30, we're going to add a second gateway, and there is a small Dragoon cut here. We're going to make another probe to go to 31, and then we're going to make a 4th Dragoon here. Right here, right when our 3rd Dragoon finishes, we have a potential timing here. The idea is to hit right after our range finishes, with 1 Zealot and 3 ranged Dragoons. This can be quite strong against certain builds from our opponent, but the power of it varies based on rush distance, based on the timing of our range relative to our opponent's timing. And also it depends on if they got a second gateway relatively early to make 2-gate Dragoon. So obviously short rush distance makes us want to attack. Our range being faster makes us want to attack. But them having a second gateway makes us not want to attack. So you can experiment with this if you're comfortable. I highly recommend doing this in cases that you think you'll be advantaged, but it's totally optional. So if you're learning the build, you don't have to do it at all. It's completely optional. So when our robotics facility finishes, we're going to be ready to put down our observatory immediately so that we have our observer in time for a potential DT. And then we're going to add a pylon, which is quite early, but you're going to see our supply gets very tight here. When our 4th Dragoon finishes, we start 2 Dragoons immediately. And then when our observatory finishes, we'll be at 40 out of 41, and we can start our observer immediately. After that observer, we start our support bay so that we can get a Reaver out immediately after our observer finishes. And from here, we're actually going to cut Dragoons. We're not going to make any more after these 6. And we're going to cut our probes after this one right here as well. So on 47 supply. So right here is when a DT would come. It slightly depends on if you scout range or not. If you see range spinning and then you evacuate your probe, then right now is the fastest the DT can come. So the DT, you'll see the DT right when the observer reaches your natural, and you can catch it with your Dragoons. If you don't see range spinning, then right now you want to have one of these Dragoons sitting in your ramp so that it blocks a potential DT coming in, because it comes slightly faster than this observer can come. On 47 out of 49 supply, I personally cut Dragoons and I cut probes, and I get down my Nexus on 47 and then a pylon on 47. Some players prefer to put down a pylon earlier and make probes constantly in this period, but I think it's quite important to get the Nexus down as quickly as possible, so this is the way that I do that. Once this pylon is down, we're going to make 2 probes here, and then right when this pylon finishes, we're going to add our second Reaver. Right now is the timing that a 3-gate or a 2-gate Robo that goes shuttle and then Reaver would hit. So if we see either of those 2 builds, we're going to defend in very similar ways. We want to have our Dragoons as far back as possible. Right now I have them sitting here, but that's incorrect if a 3-gate or a very fast Reaver push would come. We would want our Dragoons to be as far back as possible, and our Reaver is going to be sitting as far back as possible as well. And our focus is going to be on spreading our Dragoons against the opponent's Reaver, if they have one, and getting really good Scarabs with our Reaver. The reason we want to be so far back is because arcs are very, very important in PvP, especially in Dragoon Reaver versus Dragoon Reaver. If you can make your opponent clump up in this area while you have a bigger arc, then you will have a higher likelihood of winning the fight. Partially because your Dragoons will focus fire better, but your Reaver will get much bigger Scarabs as well. So if you're defending here, just focus on keeping your Dragoons back and good Reaver Scarabs. So if there's no push coming here, then we just focus on our build. We're going to put down a pylon on 54 and make 1 Dragoon on 55. The supply is really tight here, so you have to be kind of careful in what you're building. But as long as you're making Reavers, you're going to be pretty safe. When your natural is between 650 and 700 health, you can transfer your probes so that right when it finishes you have full saturation ready to go. And then from here, the build is basically done. You're going to continuously make probes out of both nexuses, and you're going to constantly make dragoons as best you can out of these two gateways. From your robo, once you finish your observer and your two reavers, you want to make a shuttle. And then from there, it really depends. If your opponent's being very aggressive, you want to constantly make reavers, so you can get 3+ reavers if you need them. If they're not being aggressive, then you tend to want to get more observers so that you can scout your opponent's gateway count, whether drops are coming. You can position an observer here to scout for any drops, etc. Typically from here, the way a game will look is you'll get somewhere between 3 and 6 gateways pumping dragoons, depending on how aggressive your opponent is being. And then you'll get your Citadel and Forge to begin upgrades, and your Templar Archives to get, basically you want 6 gates with Templar tech on 2 bases, and then take your third. There are situations where you can take a super fast third off of, say, 3 gates, but in general, a healthy 2 base end, or not end game, but mid game is 6 gateways, Templar tech, making Speed Zealots and High Templar, and then taking your third. So that was the Robo Gate PvP build. Very standard, robust, and safe, and I highly recommend it. And good luck.